Hello there, my name is Oliveira. I am a Brazilian attorney, also licensed in Texas and California, and today I'm going to answer this question. What documents do I need for a probate and inheritance in Brazil? So let's now talk about probate. What is a probate? Brazilians, we call it in Portuguese inventário, but of course the correct translation for inventário is not inventory. The correct translation for inventário it's probate, but most Brazilians, they don't know about the name probate. So whenever you are discussing about a probate with a Brazilian, you may hear this name inventário or inventory very often. And of course, inventory is just like a list of items, and it's not the correct translation. But for the sake of communication, if the Brazilian is mentioning inventory, you understand that they mean actually probate. In Brazil, most of the cases involving foreign citizens and assets in more than a single country, this process is going to be handled at the court level. There is also the possibility of handling a probate at a registry, in Portuguese we call cartório, but this route is not available again for most foreign citizens since assets are usually going to be in different countries, and this is going to preclude, according to Brazilian law, the use of a registry or cartório to simplify the probate. And that's very unfortunate because probates at the court level may take several years to resolve. So in the probate, you're going to see three different things. You're going to see the collection of assets, meaning that the judge is going to try to find out all the assets involved. The judge is going to try to find all the heirs who should participate in the probate, and the judge is going to conduct an accounting of the probate with assets, debts, payments of taxes, and at the end, the distribution of the net assets to the heirs. Now, in terms of the documents, there are going to be two distinct sets. The probate manager is going to, bear the bulk of the work by seeking documents such as the death certificate, a bunch of documents to allow the filing to occur, and then you're also going to have the heirs who are going to be in charge of a different set of documents, usually very reduced when you consider the paperwork to be handled by the probate manager. And the probate manager, by the way, is usually one of the heirs. A judge is going to prefer to have as a probate manager someone who was close to the deceased. So in the list or in the order of priorities, the current spouse would be the preferred probate manager, but this could also be like one of the children, or it could even be a third party, such as an attorney for the family. Another thing that is going to impact on the documents is going to be how simple or how complex the case is. And for simple cases, it is common for maybe a dozen or a couple of dozen documents to be enough. But for complex cases, many assets and many heirs, this could easily become a couple of hundred documents required over the course of a probate. So let's talk a little bit about the probate manager, which again is going to be the person who's going to be representing the probate before the court. And when I say that the probate manager is going to be an heir, it doesn't mean that this person is going to be making like legal decisions. Of course, the heir is going to be supported by an attorney, but the probate manager is the one making decisions in, let's say, conjunction with the attorney. The attorney is going to be advising from a technical legal perspective, and the probate manager is going to be trying to drive this process from a common sense perspective, right? And one of the missions for this probate manager ideally is to avoid fighting between the family members, because if a probate will almost always take years to resolve, when you have a fighting between family members, this could easily exceed, for instance, 10 years. And in my experience, unfortunately, I have seen probates lasting for more than 20 years. Right? So whenever, like family members start to discuss, I can see that there is some type of issue going on. I quickly recall them that, listen, if they want to see any assets during their lifetime, they better off avoid fighting, disputes. It's certainly a matter for family members to collaborate in order for them, again, to receive the assets during their lifetime. Again, unfortunately, not rare when they are fighting for a probate to exceed the lifetime of some of the participants, actually very common. And again, focusing on the documents required from the probate manager, usually we're talking about the death certificate, we're talking about a search for wills, and if the probate is occurring in Brazil, the judge will usually request a search throughout the Brazilian registries to see if there was a will. He is not going to order a search in the United States. So usually one of the heirs or the probate manager is going to show up saying, listen, and by the way, there is a will in the United States. There is also the need to show a proof of address in Brazil. So the Brazilian judge is going to know in which state the probate would need to be initiated in case, in the event, the deceased was, of course, living in Brazil. It could be the case that the deceased was living in the United States. So this is going to be decided, or this is going to be reviewed during the course of the probate. And of course, the probate manager is also going to be required to present all documents related to the person of the probate manager if the probate manager is one of the heirs. Now let's talk about the documents, the common documents for the heirs. And in this case, because this video is for foreign citizens, we're going to try to imagine the docs required for an heir for a probate in Brazil who happens to be a foreign citizen. So foreign citizens usually do not have a Brazilian ID, and therefore the main ID to be used in a probate in Brazil is going to be your passport. Of course, the passport must be valid and ideally not expiring anytime soon, because guess what? You're going to be using this document not only to start the probate, but also eventually to get title to some of the assets in the probate. So my recommendation, if you have just a couple of years in your passport, make sure to apply for a new one so you have the whole 10 years on your passport before presenting it to the Brazilian authority. Another key document for you as a foreign citizen to participate in a probate in Brazil is going to be the Brazilian tax ID, known as a CPF. You cannot participate in a Brazilian probate without the Brazilian tax ID. So yes, you are obligated to apply for a Brazilian tax ID. And the way for you to do that when you are abroad is for you to apply through a Brazilian consulate, usually the closest one, which is going to be the consulate in charge of your jurisdiction. It's also possible to apply in Brazil, but our recommendation is for you to apply abroad because it's easy, and nowadays, at least as of 2025, the consulates have this role of issuing tax ID for foreign citizens who have like a legal or financial interest in Brazil. Now, in addition to those pieces of documents which are key, there is something that is very surprising to most foreign citizens, which is documents for your spouse. Because in the Brazilian legal system, it is customary for a spouse to have an interest in your participation in a probate, even though also from the Brazilian legal perspective, actually money or assets coming from inheritance are going to be just yours, but still the Brazilian legal system wants to be extra careful and will require your spouse to participate in the probate. And again, this is not an option, this is mandatory. So as long as you are participating in the probate, your spouse is going to need to participate as well, of course, as your spouse. And from that perspective, it triggers the need for your spouse to have a good passport and to have the Brazilian tax ID as well. On top of that, if you have a spouse, guess what? The Brazilian court will want to see your marriage certificate and potentially even your birth certificate if your marriage certificate does not have your parents' names on it. As a matter of ID, we understand in Brazil that nobody can be identified unless we know the person's parents' name. So if the marriage certificate that you are providing has parents' names for you and your spouse, in theory, you don't need to provide a birth certificate. But guess what? If your marriage certificate does not have your parents' names on it, then yes, you're gonna need to provide a birth certificate as well. Also very common, if there was a name change for you or your spouse, the court would expect either the marriage certificate to explain the name change or an additional document explaining the link between one's single name and one's married name. Finally, it's very probable that you will have to present a power of attorney unless you are hiring an attorney yourself. So if you have a local relative or a local party represent you in the probate, you're also gonna need to provide a power of attorney. A power of attorney done abroad for a non-Brazilian is a very difficult process, and we also have videos recorded about the many steps that you're gonna need to complete in order to get a valid power of attorney in Brazil. I hope this video was helpful. Consider scheduling a consultation to discuss your probate in Brazil, to have your questions answered, and follow us for more tips.